Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Turpeau, and welcome to the Dr. Turpeau Show. As you know by now, this is a show where I interview fascinating people who have very interesting stories because, there's a lot of people that I meet, and every time I meet them and I talk to them, I say, wow, this person has a very interesting story. And so this has happened to me a couple of times with our guest today, and I call him Uncle Thad. He's a very wise man. He's a very interesting person. He has a lot of fascinating stories. So I said, you know what? I would really like Uncle Thad, if you would come and let me interview you on the Dr. Turpeau Show. So I'm really excited. I'm sure other people will be inspired by what they hear today. So, what's that?
I said, I'm happy to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So today, the title of the show is Who is Thaddeus Taylor Jr.? And so we're going to jump right on in. And hey, Uncle Thad, how are you, sir?
Fine, and yourself?
Doing well, doing well. So I find that there's no place like the beginning to start. And so I'd like to kick off and ask you, just tell me about, your childhood, the beginning, when you were born, where you were born, what was it like for you growing up as a kid?
Okay. I was born in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
I lived most of my life in New Orleans, early life. I went to a school 3 blocks from the house called McDonough number 6.
Now, what year were you born?
1925.
1925. Wow.
25.
That's great. And so what was it like growing up in New Orleans during that time?
Well, of course, segregation was prime at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And another interesting thing, I see all of this commotion about electric cars. Well, back in 1933, all of the beer companies in New Orleans used electric trucks to deliver their beer. That's what I'm saying. They talked about electric cars now, but there were a lot of electric cars in the 1930s in New Orleans, particularly trucks. The beer companies, all the beer companies used trucks, the electric trucks, to deliver the beer. But I said it, I went to school at McDonough number 6, which was 3 blocks. At that time, there were 2 schools in New Orleans, Bellini C. Jones, which was down below Canal Street, and McDonough number 6, which was above Canal Street. Mm-hmm. Well, all of the so-called elite African Americans who lived below Canal Street sent their kids to Bellini C. Jones. All of the so-called elite above Canal Street sent their kids to McDonough number 6. Okay. So those 2 schools were what we used to call the key schools at that time.
Mm-hmm. And these were for Black students?
Yeah. Okay. Because all the schools were segregated at that time. And also another interesting thing was that New Orleans had only 1 Black high school for the whole city.
What was the name of that one?
McDonough 35.
McDonough 35.
And it was the only Black high school, public high school. The rest of the high schools were private. Xavier High School was a Catholic high school. Gilbert Academy, where I went, was a Methodist high school. And Gaudet, which was a Episcopal school. Okay. Those were the 4 high schools for African Americans in New Orleans at that time. Okay. Of course, I went to Gilbert Academy, graduated from Gilbert Academy, went to Howard 1 year.
What year did you graduate high school?
1942.
42, okay.
Right. And then I went to Howard 1 year. Then I was drafted out of Howard into the Navy.
Wow. Okay. So you went to Howard, and then while you were there, you got drafted into the.
Yeah, that was the time. That was in 43.
Okay.
Everybody was getting drafted. The military was really going up because we were in the middle of the war at that time.
So what was that like, being in the Navy during World War II?
Well, and the Navy was very interesting. I was in what was called the Seabees, which was a construction battalion of the Navy that they developed during World War II. And that's when I got in trouble when I first got there. I mean, after going into a battalion, I was one of the first 13 black instructors there. And then when after the war was going down and they were getting ready to close Camp Perry, Virginia, we had a very high level personnel department that was started by a black fellow out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, who was the manager of the African American section of the employment service. He came in and set up a whole personnel system. And we had some of the top level officers at that time. There were no black officers at that time in the Navy. Shortly thereafter, I guess it was about 3 months thereafter, they finally took in the first 10 African-American ensigns in the Navy. Then, of course, now, it's grown tremendously because a African-American woman is now the top admiral in the Navy. So, but at that time, there were no commissioned officers in the Navy. So we were happy to be the first black 13 instructors. And then, of course, we turned the whole area into a black area.
Okay.
And
now you said instructors, and what types of things were you instructing?
we used to call the boot instructor, the drill instructor,
Okay.
the Gomi Powell sergeant, who was training everybody in the training unit. Well, we were the trainers at that time. Then they decided to close it down, and they sent us into battalions. And we had the dregs of the whites into the battalion with a bunch of high-level African Americans. Now you can imagine what that created. Now, I had an officer who told me I had anchors on my right arm because in the Navy you had right arm ratings and left arm ratings. Right arm ratings were particularly according to the line of command.
Okay.
The left arm ratings were all service, like carpenters, pipe fitters, and that's type of person was a left arm rating. Well, he saw me with the right arm rating, and he told me, he said, I want you to know this is a white man's Navy, and you ain't got no business with that anchors on your arm. You're only supposed to have a moon, which is a cook, or a steward mate, which was guys who took care of the officers. And then I went into specialist school, and I was in the chemical warfare unit. And the policy was that whoever made the highest mark in the class became the leader of the chemical warfare unit in the outfit. Dear old me had a 96. The closest to me was a white chief, 71. Well, right away, you know what I was considered? I have to tell you what I was considered? A smart.
Go ahead.
You know what? Smart, you know what?
Yeah.
And so then I was marked. From that point on, I was marked in the battalion. Because, so they decided that instead of making a chemical warfare unit, they wouldn't have one. They just wouldn't have a chemical warfare unit. So if we had gotten into a chemical warfare, we would have all had to die because we would not have had a unit to take care of us. You know?
Okay.
That was because I was the number one man.
And they didn't.
In 96, and they weren't going to hear that. You know.
Right.
So anyway, I finally wound up on Shore Patrol. That was the military police of the Navy until I was discharged.
Okay.
And then, of course,
And you were discharged when?
in 1946,
46.
April 2nd, 1946. I can remember that day very well.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
That's like a birthday, a rebirthday.
To go home and get away from these characters that we were with. But that was pretty much. And then, of course, I went back to school, graduated from Dillard. And I was headed for the ministry, which I think you can relate to. Mm-hmm. Went out to Irish School of Theology in Denver, Colorado. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to give up the ministry and go into social work, mm-hmm. which is what I did.
Which is still ministry, but more secular.
Yeah, but it's without. And I was able to get to the Youth Services Division in Colorado. And I was deputy director of the Colorado State Children's Home. And at that home, we took dependent, neglected, and emotionally disturbed children. And we worked with them on a 24-hour basis. And we were given kids from the juvenile court. Okay. You know. And of course, I messed up because we were getting criminals sent to the home, and we were not designed for that. So smart me went to the state archives and got a copy of the operation of the children's home. Okay. And we found that we were not to take criminals. Mm-hmm. And so we reduced the population from 400 to 150. Mm-hmm. Now, state legislators seeing the same amount of money going for 150 kids that went for 400, begin to look with ideas that, hey, maybe we should cut this thing out. Well, he says we only have 150 kids here, taking up all this money. Well, I have to admit, I was giving them a luxury type operation. And clothing, I would take them to the clothing distributors and buy all the clothing for them, where they used to have a woman come in and make uniforms for them, And so they decided to close it. Well, that's when I went to the Job Corps. I was one of the first designers of the Job Corps.
Wow, interesting, yeah.
And I built a camp in Hoxie, Michigan. And then I left there and went down to Battle Creek to an urban center, and I was operation coordinator for that center. And then I decided after that.
Where was this now? You were in Michigan?
Yeah, it was in Cadillac, Michigan, where I built the first center. Then I went down to Battle Creek, Michigan, at a much larger center. That way I was the operations coordinator.
And this is for the Job Corps?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I left there, I went down to a little town called Lima, Ohio.
All right.
I met my father.
Oh yeah, I remember Lima, Ohio.
And
this was Lima. What year is this about?
Oh man, don't give me call on the years because I lost the years.
We were there in the 60s.
In the 60s was that what it was. In the 68. Because 68, my wife was involved.
Okay.
I've lost track on dates and dates.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Don't ignore that. That was just a beep on my end.
Oh. And as I said, that's what I met your father and mother. And when we left Lima, where did we go? We went to Michigan, down to Michigan, Minnesota for a short while. Then we went to Florida, and we were down in Florida. I was, at that time, oh God, I can't think of the name of the operation now. Anyway, I went down there as deputy director of that operation, which was right after the Detroit riots.
Okay.
The same operation that developed after the Detroit riot, they developed in Miami. And I went down as deputy director for that.
Mm-hmm.
When I left there, where did I go? When I left,
Atlanta.
That's right, we left.
Atlanta.
That's right, we left Miami and came to Atlanta.
And so what were you doing in Atlanta when you came to Atlanta?
When I came to Atlanta, I was regional director for the National Council on Aging, because at that time, that year was the year Nixon put up the first money to deal with seniors.
Oh,
okay. And the Office of Aging was established at that time. And I came up to Atlanta to head up the employment section or the manpower section of that operation.
Oh, okay, good.
After that,
Delaware.
You
went to Delaware?
Oh, that's right. We did go to Delaware. I forgot about that. We were in Delaware. We were in Delaware for about 2 years. I was with the Council on Aging. Yeah, they transferred me to Delaware. And I took care of the Philadelphia operation. And so at one point I had 2 regions, Atlanta and Philadelphia. It's only because we got shortage. Then after that,
Atlanta.
Came back to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And
King Center.
Yeah, through your father again, I got the job at the King Center as director of the Martin Luther King Center.
Okay, and so say us again what you were doing at the King Center, what you did?
I was director of the King Center at that time.
Okay.
Executive director. And of course, it was in the King Center federal operation, but it was a city of Atlanta operating that particular operation.
Okay.
And at the community center at that point. Mm-hmm. And then I retired.
Okay.
I decided to come home and sit down.
You remember that day? You worked real hard all those years. Do you remember that day when that year was that you retired, rather? It was in the 80s, 90s?
90s.
It was in the 90s.
In the 90s, okay.
I think my wife says 94.
Okay. All right. So I just want to get some type of time frame. You worked real hard serving the community in a lot of different ways, and all around the country. And so you've seen a lot and you've done a lot for a lot of people. So that's really admirable.
I was in Denver. I was with the interesting. I have a couple of good stories that of people. Had a Spanish American woman, Alberta Garcia was her name. And she had been on welfare.
Mm-hmm.
Her son had been in trouble a couple of times. And I went over and started working with her. Mm-hmm. And, she came in one day and her daughter, she had 2 daughters. And they weren't happy with Mama being on welfare because they were missing a lot of stuff. And they had an aunt and some cousins who worked at a pie factory, which was about six blocks in the neighborhood. And that particular family was beginning to take advantage of a lot of things that Alberta's family was not able to take care of. So the two girls decided they were wanted to go to the pie factory and work with their cousins and their aunt. And Mama came over to me and said, if they go to the pie factory, I'm going to lose my welfare. So I said, no, Berta, let's go through a little operation here. And I said, how much money do you get from welfare? So he told me, I said, well, now, $1 can get, they're working at that time for $8 an hour. I said, now, figure out how much money $1 can make. I said, $1 can make more money than you getting on welfare. I said, now $2 making that money, you're in good shape. So she went back home and she came back the next day and she says, I'm going to the pie factory with my daughters.
All right.
So she and the daughters went to the pie factory.
All right. Very good.
So about a year later, she came and called me. She said, Mr. Taylor, I'm buying a house. It was a little shotgun house.
Yeah.
She was buying it.
Yes. That's
And
rewarding.
so she had no more concern about welfare as opposed to the pie factory.
All right.
And so she came out and I said, well, now she's buying a house. Her daughter bought a house also. So there were two of them bought her houses, these little shotgun houses. But they were their houses. They were able to fix them up and do what they wanted to do with them. And they had moved out of the housing project. See? So, and then another one Halloween night, I had the community center. We were having a Halloween party. And I had a character come in and he picked up a table and threw it over on one of the workers. Of course, I lit into him, threw him out the door. It was snowing outside. And I drew back and I was fistling hit him and I said, no, don't you hit him. And he got up and left. And I was in the grocery store one day, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And I turned around, and it was this guy dressed up with his Ivy League shirt and tie on. What the heck happened to you? He threw me out of that building that night. He said, you woke me up. And I decided from that on, I wasn't going to mess around. And he had gone to training, and he was, that time was a hospital operation room attendants where they moved, sterilized the equipment, the utensils, and moved them back and forth in the operating room. You know? So I said, well, now here are two successful ventures that I have been instrumental in doing.
Yeah.
And it was very nice to see that, particularly this boy, because he was on his way to jail.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like it.
Now down here he is now in the operating room, providing a service, you know, and making money for himself and his whole working life.
So tell me a little bit. Tell me a little bit about when you met Aunt Vera and what that was like.
Well, I was.
This is Vera Taylor, your wife. I'm talking about. Yeah.
Job Corps. And,
you were at Job Corps, okay?
Yeah, and I had come down from Cadillac, Michigan, to Battle Creek to the Cadillac was what was called a rural center, and Battle Creek had what they call an urban center. And I went to this urban center, and I was operations coordinator for the whole operations, whole center. And I was sitting in my office, and this little fly gal passed, and I said, "Hey, who are you?" She says, I miss Blue. I said, okay, Miss Blue. How about lunch? How about dinner? She says, I'm busy. I said, okay. But next time, I won't accept your being busy. And from then on, we have been together. Now it's 52 years, going on 53 years. And that's how we met. And we've been together ever since, It's been very interesting. I was, many occasions, I had to suffer the excruciating pain of being the first black in a lot of jobs. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, that's nothing happy.
Right.
You got to fight every day, all day, for every position you have.
And then you don't have that white privilege that allows a lot of white people to get away with certain things, and that lacks. You have to be constantly on top of everything.
Constantly on guard, and you can't turn your back. Another thing that happened while I was in Colorado, the Youth Services Division, I was already in at the children's home. And they had 2 jobs open up at the industrial school for boys and the industrial school for girls. And so I took the exam. Well, the director brought in a boy from Oklahoma. He was a prison guard, warden in Oklahoma. And he came up to Colorado to take over the state, the Youth Services Division. And he brought this one fellow from Oklahoma with him and gave him the test. Well, at the boys' school, he made 98, and I made 97. At the girls' school, I made 98, and he made 97. But the director of the girls' school didn't want a man.
Gotcha.
Okay? But yet, he brought another guy from Oklahoma, gave him the job. I mean, he gave him the test, and he made 98, and he put him in the girls' school, even though she wouldn't want a man there. He put one there anyway. Put him for one reason. So at that time, I got mad, and I said I was going to Alaska. And so I went to call the shots and got all ready to go to Alaska. And then the director called and said he had just gotten approval for that job to be at the children's home, which I was already in.
Okay.
The only thing I would do was raise my salary.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about another aspect of your interest in life as you're a photographer. Give us some history on your...
Well, back when I was in college, I went to photography school and
while you were at Dillard?
School of Photography in New Haven, Connecticut. It was on Yale's campus. And it was right in the war when a lot of military men were veterans were going back to school.
Oh, okay.
I went up there and I took the course for photography. And I worked at that time we had a newspaper called the Pittsburgh Courier. And they served all over the country. They produced the papers in Pittsburgh, but they covered the whole country. And I was working for them, and I was shooting public relations shots as well as sports shots. I shot football, and I was also the official photographer for Dillard University when I was there doing my tenure at Dillard University.
Mm-hmm.
And then I opened a studio for a while. And then when I came to Colorado, I dropped it because I didn't have the money or the time to do it in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to Atlanta, I started back again. I got involved in some clubs and started doing some work, opened up a studio. Didn't last too long, but I still was doing a lot of the photography work at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was part of the Georgia Professional Photographers Association.
Okay.
And I hung, forgotten what year it was now, but I hung some pictures in their exhibit that they had one year. And when I went back to social work, doing more social work, I just dropped most of the photography at that time. But as you know, I did some because I did Your Family Again.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, some classic pictures there.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about some of the photographic abstracts that you've done.
Oh, the abstracts.
And tell us what that is.
That was how did I get involved with that? I guess I was in Delaware when I first started that, because one of the first pictures I had won a contest in Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I had some glass, bubble type glass, and I put a a champagne glass on top and put some lights under the bottom, thinking the lights would come through the glass and then come through the champagne glass. And I don't know, it worked out, but I got an interesting picture. I now call it the African princess, because it turned sideways now, it looks like a head of an African princess. And I decided one time that I would shoot just crinkle tinfoil with Christmas tree lights. And that's how I started getting the abstracts.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's very interesting because you have to have certain types of lenses in order to get the effect, which is what I happen to have, the combination of lenses that will give me that effect, where you can take a area half the size of a fingernail and blow it up and put it up on a 35 millimeter slide, so that you can then blow it up.
How can some people actually get to see or get copies of some of these abstracts that you have?
What we're now getting ready to do is, I'm not too familiar and I'm not too sharp on putting this stuff on the computer.
Mm-hmm.
My wife does, she's doing all that, so she can take those transparencies, and they're all on digital now. I just put them all on digital, and she can put them on the computer and show them to people who want to see them.
Okay.
But,
okay. Good. That's very good. Now, what do you have going on now? I think I heard something to the effect that you're working on with her another project as well.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think in '93, my mind doesn't function like it used to.
Hey, it functions. I love for my mind to function like that when I'm 93. Shoot, I like it to function like that today. I mean,
we're talking about the bullying. She's talking.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't bully And there was an article in today's Journal-Constitution on bullying, which I gave her. And she's trying to use a theory of love of power to the power of love.
Oh, that's great.
And that's what we are working on. She's using that terminology as I don't know what you call it. She has to talk about that. I mean, I have to talk about that. Can't remember all of the things that she talks about so many times, but that's going to be the basic in calling bullying and instead of bullying, buddying instead of bullying. And, instead of love of power, the power of love. Those are two things that she's hoping to put out now at this particular point.
Okay, very good. So now you lived a long, prosperous, rich life and a lot of different experiences. What would be some words of advice that you could give to future generations as far as how to be a successful family man, a person successful in their career, or just in life and period? And what would you like to pass down to future generations?
Well, one thing I have always remembered a class I took in Colorado, at the University of Colorado, on counseling. And the prime objective was choices, proper choices and adjustments. You make proper choices, then you have to adjust your activity to those choices that you make. And when you do that, you have a tendency to be successful, avoid a lot of pitfalls that most people get into. They make a choice. They don't try to adjust to that choice. The other thing as far as having a happy and successful married life, I say, let your partner be in control. Let your partner be in control.
Mm-hmm.
And then that means that you don't always have a lot of frustration and contradictions and things like that to put up with or to deal with at that time.
Mm-hmm.
To always be concerned with helping somebody and being in a position to assist and help and be pretty much helpful to anybody and everybody that you can. And have a big smile on your face, that helps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All right. Well, very good, sir. Thank you very much for your time. Time flew by. It always does when you're having fun.
You mean I've talked 30 minutes already?
Pretty much. I mean, anything else you want to add?
No, just continued success in your operations.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, again, I appreciate you being in my life and all these years, and your family. You have a great family. You've done well in a lot of areas of your life. So kudos to you, much admiration to you. And again, I want to thank you for joining this interview and passing down some stories and some history and some wisdom to future generations.
Good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, Uncle Thad. Take care. Bye-bye.